All right, hello everyone. My name is Disc, and in this video we have a 25 Uldaman, and for the week we are Tyrannical, Entangling, and Bursting. So off the top, we do have quite a few changes around my channel, which I hope you've noticed, but as of last week, I am now a verified partner on Medify.gg as one of their official discipline teachers. So I'm really excited for that, and that's going to be the way I kind of do my private lessons. And I think the videos I teach here do a lot of good, but I think one-on-one can serve a lot more purpose for you, and it's really easy to book me now. So, and then over on the YouTube side, instead of having a Patreon open to receive tips, I kind of thought that made it a little bit harder, and personally, I wouldn't want to go to another site to tip someone. So YouTube has a feature now, if you look right below the video, called Super Thanks, and I've turned that on. So I'm kind of going to abandon the Patreon, and if anyone wants to give me tips for my videos, you can do it right here within YouTube. So first, let's talk about talents for this key, and this is a pretty specific talent build, so let me go through it one by one here. And over on the priest side, I do not take improved purify, although it is useful here. We just really don't have the points to spare, being that it's a bursting week. So being that it's bursting, we do have to have improved mass. I really think improved mass is the way to go always if you're questioning it. And it's not really for the reduction of the cooldown, it's for the faster cast. And then we also need Holy Nova and Rhapsody. This is just like the way right now. And then for last boss only, really, we want Phantasm. This is a really great way to remove the dot off of yourself. So you definitely want that here. And then I go straight down to the Bulwark as my cheat death in a sense. Crystalline Reflection, because that pairs really well with our shields. And yeah, Tithe Evasion, you pretty much always want that. And due to all of the points I had to spend over here this week, and Phantasm, this was my flex point. I dropped Throws of Pain to 1. And then on the discipline side, this is one of the few times I really bank defensive, and I was really trying my hardest here to time the key. And there are so many places where having just kind of like one extra button does a lot of good. So I do have a point in Bright Pupil just to get a little bit more out of it. And my flex point came from my Malicious Intent. I also don't think Malicious Intent is that great here, and mainly for the boss with the totem you have to kill. So I don't think putting your Schism on the totem is the right call, but you do need to hit it. Therefore, I don't think it's worth putting a point to Long Schism. And then all the way down, I don't take TE. That's nothing new. That is just not my preferred playstyle. And then before we start the key, the last thing I want to talk about are meters and what to expect in this video. And first, this is a spread of our HPS, and this is pretty predictable. Your Atonement is going to lead on the top by a mile, and being that we have a cooldown on Radiance, that's why we're seeing it second, doing quite a bit better. This is one of the times where I feel like over atoning and using Radiance just for its upfront heal actually has a lot of value in here. And then looking at Shield and Aegis together, it's right at, let's say, 20 million and then 11 million. So off the top, I absorbed 30 million damage, which is pretty good. And then here's the DPS meters. Again, not too much here. Purge the Wicked, you really want on top in most scenarios. That, as far as a mini game goes, is very important for us. Every dot equates to a bigger heal. And not only is it a heal, it's also good damage. We have penance to spread our dots around. So that mini game is really important to keep like high uptime. And then Holy Nova here, I'm not really spamming Holy Nova in this key. I think the majority of this is coming from Rhapsody. So that just kind of shows how valuable this talent is right now. And then the interesting part about the shadow group of my spells here is Divine Stars on top. And that really just goes to show that there's a lot of mobs to attack here. There's a lot of AoE. That's also why we see my trinket thrown in the mix. And that's also why the single target, the Expiation, Shadow Word Death, Mind Blast, those are all on the bottom because I'm favoring so many AoE spells. And the reason Dark Reprimand is on top is because I'm still giving that spell a priority because of the functionality to spread our dot. So it's always good to spread your dot, and if I'm going to do that, I might as well proc it. And it's on top even without Long Schism, which is new for this channel. But I think one important thing to note here, if you ever are examining your meters, my Dark Reprimand dealt around 8 million damage, and then at the bottom Penance was under 4. So you really want to see your Dark Reprimand at least double that of your Penance, if not a little bit more. And that is something you'll always see if you're playing it correctly. And then with all that being said, let's go ahead and clip over to the key. All right, here we go.
5,
and my plan here,
4, 3, 2.
I want to model this, or try modeling it after my lesson videos where I have like a stop and go feature. It also gives an extra mouse on the screen where I can like use it as a pointer. But this is non-fortified, so this is just a Zerg right here. Paladin is my PI target, opening with as many dots as possible. Noticing the Berserker is a darker red, that is KUI Nameplates, highlighting him as a good focus. Also the Basilisks are good focuses. And as we're about to rally, I have no atonements, that is not good. Using Penance to spread my dots, there's PI. Wall early is not a bad idea. Desperate Prayer. Neither is Barrier. And here's my Shadow Covenant. Dropping Rhapsody. It's really easy to eat up your Pain Sups in this first pull. And I don't think using one is a bad idea. But I think using Barrier might be better. And I about have a whoopsie here. Yeah. Pick up that Execute for some quick recovery of health. And I do pull it together in the rest of this key. I think this was my first key of the day, and the bursting caught me off guard. Thankfully there were no deaths. That would have been my fault completely. But not to worry. Yeah, pull it together here on out. So there's a lot we're going to talk about here about what goes wrong for once, and watching the rogue. Eek. So something happened there where he canceled his shroud. Really bad. It was just a mistake, but he has many of those in this key. No tea, no shade either. He knows it. But I don't know what happened there. His shroud canceled. And we ended up having this huge double that wasn't planned for with him not here. So one of the problems with an Evoker group is if one of your 2 DPS dies, that's pretty much you're losing half your muscle. I just got hit by a slam. It's hard to say for like certain, but the rogue lost this key for us. He has a lot of mistakes, like cringe mistakes. There he goes. So he's getting hit by these slams, and I talked to him after the key. And if anyone watches my channel, you know that I always preach turning off as many notices as possible in bigwigs, because we're trying to prevent this like alert fatigue, if you will. So in a pull like that with 15 mobs, if every single attack from every mob is beeping at you, you essentially have no alert system anymore. So you really need to whittle that down and only keep the important ones on. And for Mythic Plus, I would say the important ones for most people are just the attacks you have to dodge. Most things you don't need on. Okay, so we have this boss. Defensives are really important. Our desperate prayer, I might call it wall in short speak. We definitely want to cover ourselves with a defensive on every totem. And here's our first totem. So I opted to hold spells since we had Bloodlust. I'm not sure there's necessarily an exact best play of spells here. You kind of just have to take it as it comes. But when the ads come out, you want to dot all of them because we need to schism the boss. Unfortunately, we have to have our heals coming out before the totem. So our schism needs to go to the boss, and if all ads are dotted, when we penance our schism, the totem will take a dot. Shadow Fiend. Yep, so I just dotted the totem. I used Star. I used my Rhapsody. And I also paired up my wall there. But one really important factor about this boss, we really need all the help we can get, and our execute heals are going to be the best we can do. So we have all these opportunities on the ads to pick up executes, and the totem doesn't despawn instantly, and you can always get 2 executes on the totem. So it's not a bad idea to give it some love. It really needs it, to be honest. Give it spells. And that was my Rapture round. 2 executes on the tail end for quick recovery. Yeah, so in this interim, all we really want to do is dot ads and make sure our Harsh Discipline is ready for the totem, which is also the only attack I'm tracking in Bigwigs. That's all that matters here. So I have a full Atonement ramp and group. Watching very closely for this totem. All ads are dotted. And this is my barrier round. Oh yeah. So I used a potion there. And when I watch this back, I've watched it back a couple times already, so I can talk about it better. You should always play a Shadow Covenant on each totem. The way it lines up, you can. And on that one, I had no Shadow Covenant. And it was a little spooky, but thankfully health potion for the win. But yeah, the barrier got us through. I should have Shadow Covenanted. Also, it just didn't happen. Okay, but here we have another one. Everyone is dotted. This one is paired with VE. The penance spreads the dot. And now that we are in execute range, there is nothing to worry about here. So I've experimented with putting Schism on the totem, and although it's important to attack the totem, like you really must do that even though you're the healer, you have to give it spells, but there's so much damage incoming in those phases, we have to have our Schism out already, and we can't wait for the totem to spawn then cast on it, so we have to have our Schism on the boss. But then if we prepare correctly, it's not too bad to give it a Divine Star, make sure your dot's on it from your penance, Rhapsody, and then pick out execute ranges when it gets sub 20. You can always get 2 on the totem, and that's, I think, the best we can do there. Okay, so on this boss, quite a big pull. We're taking Trash into it for the synergy here. The Berserker increases the damage the bosses take, if you didn't know that. AoE spells early, Rhapsody and Star. And in this phase, so I'm ramping for my Rapture, and that's a new concept I've never talked about. But if you replay that again, I didn't want to go into Rapture with 0 dots out. So I refreshed all my dots first, and I consider that my Rapture ramp. Yeah, the best Rapture you can do is have everyone dotted, then Rapture. paints up and shield on the Evoker. And you'll notice in party with that shield attack, the targeted cast's weak aura highlights their frame, makes it really, really easy to see that and protect them. And right here, I would say we have a misplay from the Paladin. If you notice, his Blessing of Sacrifice went to the tank. I definitely think it should have gone to the rogue there with the shield attack on him, but thankfully another paints up and a shield is all the rogue needed. Shield and wall, and it still hurt. I could have barriered myself there. Wall was fine. So here we have Rapture available and no paints ups available. So I also have Barrier. But I go into Rapture to cover that one, and the boss died anyway. But one thing about this Rapture, someone might take it to be wasteful, but without either paints ups available, that was a Rapture mainly to reset my paints up, because we need it on boss. And I just cut forward a little bit. So in a moment like this, I'm trying to play shield on cooldown just to put as much CDR into paints up before the boss. Not sure how well I do. There was one. But you should play shield as much as possible if you're really trying to bank on that CDR with paints up. And in a boss like this coming up, you're going to need those paints ups. Oh, and also notice here, we saw it before, but these custodians are a grayish color. So my system is all mobs are a shade of red. Darker the red, the more health they have. And if they're gray, they cleave. So any nameplate you see that's gray, that is our indicator to steer clear. Okay, we have Snake Boss. We definitely want to open with a Rapture and put that on cooldown. And that was a very successful Rapture if you want to replay it. We have Shadow Covenant. We really need to get our Harsh Discipline ready. And this is one of those fights where a reactionary Radiance is the way. And I'm also noticing right now with these ads, we have Executes, which is going to be our best heal. Our best AoE heal. Worked in a mass just for comfort. And that was a defensive Dark Reprimand straight into the Ret Paladin, and he needed every ounce of it. And in these little intermissions, you really just want to go into a small holding pattern. And if we watch the Rogue here, we have another misplay from the Paladin. The Rogue gets the bleed, mitigates it himself after a couple seconds. And then after the Rogue mitigates it, the Paladin throws a very late bop, and it was totally wasted. So it was the bop's round. You need to play spells like Bop and Cauterize immediately on those bleeds. And Rapture just came available. It is very important we play it on cooldown. So here's our second Rapture, prioritizing the DPS and myself, farming that dark blue value on my Grid 2. And I got this one. I wall and a defensive penance into myself. So our defensive penance is going to be the best single target heal, and on a high Tyrannical key, you got to give that to your allies some. Thankfully we have Cauterize there. And another thing to note with Harsh Discipline here, I'm accepting loss on penance, to make sure I always have a proc. So you really want to play it a little bit differently here and bank procs for precisely when you need them. You don't want to be caught off guard without one. And Shadow Covenant just plays on cooldown. A barrier, that's for the dot in party and the party. And that was really good for him. So if you watch the Evoker coming up here, we have one of the best lay on hands I've ever seen. But also important to note, watch the Paladin react before the Evoker reacts even with Cauterize. Play, Cauterize. So I would say if I were the Evoker, I wouldn't have even skipped a beat there. I would have Cauterized myself so quick. But also if you play that back, I used my Radiance proactively to top everyone, and arguably I could have played it reactively, and he might have had, 20% more health on him or whatever. That was pretty good. Okay, again, note here we have reds, which are regular, and the gray mean cleave. So it is really important to stand behind all of these guys. Not only is that my indication that we have cleave in this pull, it's also my indicator of where. And the rogue, I'm not even going to say it, but I do pot here just to get through it and get some numbers. And these are great groups to Fear Bomb. There it was. Keeping Divine Star on cooldown. So in this next pull, it's quite similar to the previous one. We have a lot of cleaves, and we have the Hail of Stone going off as a channeled spell. That is great for our Fear Bomb. So that is the only spell I'm tracking with my bigwigs. I give it a small little ding sound. Every other spell, you don't need to track it, especially like that brown one, you can see it. But the rogue didn't. So yeah, it really sucks there because he died to the brown. He ate up a battle res and stood in a cleave. So here is about to come available. There it is. Yeah, so it's one of those things with the rogue and his alert system. If you have in a group like this, you probably have 30 alerts per second. If your computer is beeping at you so much, there essentially is no alert system. You're just kind of blind to what's important. It has been called maybe alert fatigue. But the things that are important don't stand out to you in any way when you're just flooded with so many alerts. And he's missing what's important. A couple purges there. So regardless if we are fortified or tyrannical, we have a strong focus target here. Notice the runic protector is the darkest red. We also have cleaves. So I want to ramp atonements. I have my dots ramped. You want to use Desperate Prayer, our wall spell, our shield wall spell, and Shadow Covenant. And it's really important to put your Schism on the runic protector. As our focus target, we want to give him as much leaven as possible. Yeah, executes in here are really saving the day. That's why I think it is so important to have nameplates that show you executes clearly. And in my opinion, the most simple way to visualize an execute is a color shift. So if you've not heard me talk about it or not seen it thus far, all of my bars will be a reddish color, and when they hit 20, they turn white. And I think that is a very clear way to track executes in the group. So this is a little bit spooky because I have to mass dispel for the bursting, but the way this boss goes is he puts a dot out, which takes a mass dispel, and then he does a bomb. So we want to go straight into Rapture. And the best Rapture here will be able to recoat shields after the bomb. And that was really spooky because of the bursting. I honestly My muscle memory there was reaching for Mass Dispel, even though it was on cooldown. So there was a moment where I was just fapping, and thankfully, no one died. And then also in watching this back in hindsight, I think I've just fallen into a bad rhythm here, but this intermission phase takes longer than 30 seconds. Therefore, you can fit a Shadow Covenant here. And I think the best thing to do would be maybe to Shadow Covenant and Schism the mob ahead of the group to not lose the value. Like you can put a dot on both. Executes here are also really, really pro. So it's rare that you get executes on bosses because only a small percentage of the boss is sub 20. But most bosses have ads, and that is a great way to pick up extra HPS. Also, these ads are a great place for Rhapsody. When everyone's stacked and atoned, and you get the defensive and offensive portion, that's the best you can do. The Mass Dispel first, Bomb is second. Here's our second Rapture. And again, we want to coat the group for the bomb and recoat after. Prioritizing the two of us with the least health coming out of that. And for that one, I gave myself a personal pain sup. On Tyran weeks, pain sups don't really go to the tank. They're more, I consider them personals. A pain sup on a tank is more of a fortified week, if you ask me. Almost 100%. Yeah, and I could Shadow Covenant here. It's one of those things where I learn so much when I watch myself back when I'm not in like the heat of combat. If you're someone who's interested to grow and get better as a WoW player, try recording yourself and watching yourself back. You see a lot that you don't see the first time. Looks like a defensive penance into myself. Okay, we have Barrier. No Rapture yet. And I think this gets a little spooky. So our Mass Dispel is first. I quickly picked off the one dot that was missed. My Barrier a little bit early to allow people to position. And we all about died there to getting hit by the bombs because we couldn't see. It's a little bit better. Thankfully, no one's dying. Yeah, especially when we go into the intermission with a Shadow Covenant ready, you should definitely drop it. It'll reset. And the only thing I'm thinking about now is I'm low mana. So these Mass Dispels, any week where we have multiple Mass Dispels, it's going to be hard on our mana. And I believe we went into this boss with only 60% mana. We do have Rapture though, but that is a mana sink. I have Desperate Prayer, my wall available. I'm sure I'd play it. Let's see. So I'm fapping for Mass Dispel and do not have the mana. Yeah, Pain's up to cover. Evoker got hit by a bomb. So without enough mana to Mass Dispel, we were fine in that scenario because we were in execute range and we were getting a lot more HPS. But, yeah, mana is tight this week. Moving on. So I really like what the tank did here with those things. And a couple things about my UI which I've changed, if you've not noticed. I changed my target and player frames to be class colored. I like that a lot. And I also have my mini map and all my buttons on the top right corner hide in combat. I think it's a really great way to open up the screen a little bit. You do not need those UI elements in combat at all. So there's a lot to talk about in these pulls. The best thing you can do is dot everyone, play your star, make sure I keep a renew on the tank, and if and when you can reserve your penance for the hide, because you don't need LOS for penance. Also, really important to note, this is a pull of 10, let's say. The only attack that I'm tracking is the Thunderous Clap. I have a trumpet sound on my screen when it happens. I can see its cast bar clearly on my screen in red. And also on their nameplates, I'm tracking its timer. So my entire UI for these pulls is geared completely and solely for tracking and seeing that Thunderous Clap. That is all that matters. And that is the only alert I'm tracking. And I'm saying that for a reason. So we have white mobs here. These are cleave targets. Have to be really careful. And we have more Thunderous Claps. So we can see their timer on the nameplate. That is really important. That is coming from an add-on. And the point I was trying to make is, in a pull like this, the rogue was getting 100 alerts a minute and was unable to discern which alert was a Thunderous Clap and which one wasn't. So he walked right into the group blindly, basically, took a Thunderous Clap, was battle rezzed, and went straight into another Thunderous Clap. And this is honestly where we lost the key. So his 2 deaths are 10 seconds gone on the timer immediately. And then being that he's half of our muscle on a huge pull like this, it added, I mean, it's hard to say, it added at least 20 seconds. And on this one, since the Paladin took my PI and was in AW, I went into Rapture to allow us to safely just eat those attacks. Like when PI's out, you don't want to be hiding, you want to just be attacking. And also, I have Phantasm, but I'm not really using it for the Entangling. I think it's just something I'm not used to. I really don't mind just walking out of it. Desperate Prayer, pre-Radiance. I'm really trying to pump here, so I gave myself a pain step as well, just so I can stand out. There's our Schism, Shadow Covenant. We have Fiend out as well. And the only critique I have for myself here is my Schism went on a lesser mob, and I think it was just out of necessity I needed to get heals out because I was in danger. But going for the Golems is definitely the better place for your Schism. Yeah, so I think it's really important to see that Thunderous Clap pull up as a red bar. That way it's in a fixed location, and regardless if I have LOS or he's lost in the bunch, I can clearly see that cast and kind of meter myself on when to hide. And then there's an important note here when it comes to Radiance. So I've talked about it before, but it's a short range heal. It is only 30 yards compared to our 40 yards on the rest. It is really, really easy to miss all 5 party members. And if you miss anyone, I would say you're not maximizing. And you're not going to get it perfectly every time, but the idea is to try and maximize radiance by hitting your ally in the middle of your group cluster. But what I was getting at is if in a situation like this where there's a corner, if you stand at the precipice of the corner and intentionally radiance yourself, you're going to be covering both sides of the hallway. And that's what I was doing there. Okay, so we have a couple more percents here, and we're going for the little tiny whelps. And yeah, we're not going to take the big guys. But coming up on this last boss, it is pretty hard, and there's really only two things that are going on. But it's quite hard to manage, and I think the better you can manage that, the more successful you'll be in this key. But we have a dot that goes out in party. It hits 3 people. That is what our Phantasm is for. So whenever that dot goes out, we'll see a blue border on my party frames. And if it's on me, I'll Phantasm one off and then instantly dispel another. If my fade is down, that might be when I mass dispel. But this fight can drag. So I'm trying not to mass dispel too liberally. And it's a pretty easy rotation to fade, mass, fade, mass. And so on open, we have PI, and we do want to go into Rapture to cover this first wing buffet. So you'll notice with my bigwigs, that's really all I'm tracking. However, I can see the tank slam on his party frame, and we can see the dispel in party frame 2. But the timer is the invisible one on the wing buffet. That's why we want to track it. All for that one. And it's not as cut and dry here. Like, you can't just Shadow Covenant every wing buffet. Sometimes it lines up with this phase, sometimes it lines up with the buffet. You really just want to play your Shadow Covenant on cooldown and take it where it comes. And this, I was a little bit spooked out. I barrier and shield myself. That was a Phantasm. It's never a bad idea to give yourself a single shield. It is a pretty effective defensive. And going into this buffet, this is my Shadow Fiend round, but since the group is missing quite a bit of health, I have Vampiric Embrace as well. The best defense on a buffet is full health. Okay, so no fade, no Phantasm, that was a mass. Missed my proc. So I'm just flash healing. And sometimes you have to step out. I think that's just how it goes. But coming out of that phase is straight into Shadow Covenant. And I have it timed so that it topped everyone before the buffet, and I have heals flooding after the buffet. So we do have Rapture available. Wing buffet is coming. Flash heal into Rapture, proccing my 10% reduction. Covered the buffet, and refresh heals after the buffet. This was a mass dispel, no Phantasm. This is not a good position. I'm going to potion Arcane Torrent for a little regen. And we have Shadow Covenant. I think we have to use it here. Yeah. Shadow Covenant, Mind Blast, Dark Reprimand. And if you notice right there, I radianced the wrong person. The tank was missed. Not great. That was a paints up as a personal defensive. And arguably, I could have saved a life there. It looked like I hesitated with my Mass Dispel, but the rogue probably just had it coming anyway. Yeah, the best thing you want to do with those wing buffets is have everyone topped, and you want to have something to use during the knockback. Another awful position. So it's, if you can, it's nice to have a Harsh Discipline proc for the knockback. Also, instant cast spells like Shadow Word Death are great because you can play them in the air. And now we are in execute range. We are doing good. We have Rapture available. And Shadow Covenant is what I reach for. Dark Upper Man loaded for the knockback. Looks like I filled time with a Solace. Mass Dispel. Rapture just for good measure here. Out of mana. Alright, so that was a pretty good key, and it sucks so bad that we lost by 30 seconds. It's one of those things where it's hard to say if the rogue lived, if anything would have been different. But definitely from my point of view, there were a lot of moments where the rogue just didn't see damage and wasn't doing his job to avoid it. That is a task on all WoW players. It's a very real aspect of the game, is guarding your own health. And for the most part, I think the best way you can do that is with a strong UI. And I asked him after this key, he said with his bigwigs, he keeps everything enabled just as it comes when you download it. And I just know in those large pulls when every spell is beeping at you and cluttering your screen, there's no way at all to discern the dangerous ones from the normal ones. And we saw him multiple times just walk right into damage. And it was just really sad to see. This would have been IO for me, so that sucks kind of. But at the same time, I think it was a good run and I had fun, which I think is my main drive in WoW. And yeah, from my point of view, my play was almost as good as it could have been, so I thought it was still a good video. But yeah, look at the avoidable damage down there. I'm under 1 million, which is incredible for this place. And I'm right at 50,000 damage overall. So that is really, really good. But again, thanks everyone for tuning in. If you're new to my channel, I really appreciate that as well. If you're interested in private lessons, I really love teaching people discipline. And now I have my Medify account to kind of take all my lessons. So if you're interested at all, please go check out what I'm offering over there and book a lesson. I would love to help you. It's really rewarding for me, and I think it's a great way to evolve as, you know, my Just Discipline channel here on YouTube. And also, if you're interested in tipping me through YouTube, I now have the super thanks on right below this video. So please throw me a buck if you like my videos. And until next time, Disc.